Never thought I'll do this. I never thought I'll make a video about compression. So basically what we're going to get into is compression, I guess the basics, understanding how to set it. And I'm going to be using the VT1 from Presonus, mainly because it's by Presonus. They make the DAW, which means the latency of the plugin is at its absolute lowest. So I can use many instances of it. And I love the GUI. It's really smooth. It's really nice. It just kind of sounds good. I like it. I don't have any problems with it. That's what I'm going with. However, this does not mean you cannot transfer this information to another compressor of your liking. They all do the same thing. They compress vocals. And if it has these same parameters, you can try out your compressor yourself and see how it works. But for the sake of this video, I will be using the VT1 by Presonus. So let's get into this. Now, this compression scenario is what I do on individual channels that I feel needs to be compressed. But usually my main focus is always the lead vocal first and foremost. Once I get the lead vocal, I can do everything else. But it's usually the lead vocal where things have to be ascertained immediately. So for this, we're gonna get a glimpse into the second verse here. So let's play it.
Baby, I long to know your secret thoughts and visions you hold dear. Tell me all the things you dream of. Tell me everything you see and love.
All right, so for this draft, we know we're gonna need to compress it because the dynamics are very fluid. That's where I'm gonna describe it. Now we're gonna open up the VT1. This is the compressor I like to use because it's not damaging on a vocal. Personally, in my opinion, I would like to start out with the compressor that cannot do too much. I do that because a vocal doesn't need that much compression to sit in the mix. It's gonna go through different stages. If you're not a person that uses compression in stages, then you may wanna get something like an 1176 and call it a day. But for me, I move my compression in stages. I need something to even out and curve it from the get-go. So this is what this compressor is gonna do. It is gonna round out these transients from the get-go. To start off with, we're gonna do something that I always do with my plugins. We're just gonna crank this down. Just turn down threshold. It's just gonna ride in this plugin.
So I can clearly see the new world you will bring and gaze upon the light in your eyes.
Okay, so there's two parts when I'm listening to compression. I'm listening to where the transients, and then I'm listening to where's the body. It's hard to hear where how a compressor is supposed to work unless you really understand attack and sustain. Even though it says attack and release, what you're really looking for is transients and sustain. If you're not familiar with the transient shaper, this is a good place to understand a compressor. Go listen to a transient shaper change the transient, the attack, or the sustain, which we're going to call release in a compressor, and you will see where the compressor is manipulating this stuff. For this, we're gonna crank the threshold down. We're gonna turn the ratio all the way up because what I want to do is get this compressor to define the lines between the attack transient and the sustain body, okay? So ignore the release. We're gonna focus on attack first.
As you speak life into me, a new song manifests as I take a deep breath, trying to catch up with you.
Now, when I'm moving this, it's clearly obvious where these transients are starting to come out. But if you notice in the very beginning, there's a point where it sounds like the transients should do one of these. It just kind of ducks in, right? Crank this all the way back.
Trying to think how you do what you say.
It's almost like it's trying to come out, but the only thing that can come out is the off of her tongue, which is sort of what we want in a lot of pop music variation. For this track, I'm gonna put this attack to where it's riding this fine line between the and literally cutting those out. And I wanna get it right to the point where it's starting to go under.
I long to know your secret thoughts and visions.
Right here, it's starting to pump. You see what I'm talking about?
You hold dear. Tell me all the things you dream of. Tell me everything you see and love. So I can clearly see the new world.
So get it to that point to where all that's left is right? So it still takes away the aggression.
World you will bring and gaze upon the light in your eyes as you speak life into me.
So that pumping sound now is really because of the release, because the attack is fast enough to get these, but do it smoothly, so where it's coming off like that kind of sound. Now it's the release turn. That like that reverse sound is what the release is going to control.
A new song manifests as I take a deep breath, trying to catch up with you, trying to think how you do what you say, mesmerize.
So you can kind of see as I turned the release, it started to control more and more of that sound, right?
Everything inside me, I'm flying high with you as you lead my.
Now, the problem I have with this right now is that the release is sitting good, but it's jumping out like every now and then, like something's still coming out in the beginning. So we're going to make this attack a little bit faster. So we're doing this about right here. Of course, I'll probably put more attention into how I'm really hearing this, but this is to give you an understanding of how we're really listening to attack and release when you're using your compressors. And the beautiful thing about it, there are no numbers on here. So the only thing you can do is listen and maybe watch this if you like looking at needles move.
As I take a deep breath, trying to catch up with you, trying to think how you do what you say, mesmerizes everything inside me. I'm flying high with you as you lead my intelligence higher.
So right there, I made the attack faster because I still heard transients, but right now we're in the ballpark. So then what does the ratio control? So the ratio is going to control the intensity, how much compression. If you heard in there, she took a breath. That breath was obvious. The compressor did not grab the breath. Okay. Sound like a werewolf. The compressor did not get that breath. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the ratio so that the rest of her vocals meets that breath. That way it doesn't sound as though there's a completely big dynamic change between her vocal and her breath.
I long to know your secret thoughts and visions you hold dear. Tell me all the things you dream of. Tell me everything you see and love you hold dear. Tell me all the things you dream of. Tell me everything you see and love, so I can clearly see the new world you will bring and gaze upon the light in your eyes.
So what the ratio is doing is controlling the intensity of this change. So when the compressor detected something, it's gonna go in and destroy. But we don't need it to destroy everything. We just need to smoothen it out. So we're dialing this ratio, this intensity back, so that if it detects something, it's only going to make things as quiet as a certain point, which is what I'm using is the breath.
As you speak life into me, a new song, know your secret thoughts and visions you hold dear. Tell me all the things.
You see, that breath is only so loud. So I have this around 2-1. Now watch me crank this to 4-1.
Secret thoughts and visions you hold dear. Tell me all the things you.
See how she completely sounds quieter than that breath? Because although the attack and release is evening out the vocals everywhere else, but compared to that breath, it's really quiet. So we're going to turn down the intensity so that it's going to match that breath.
You dream of. Tell me everything you see and love, so I can.
Okay, the last thing is the threshold. Remember, we had the whole vocal being detected as a threshold. What does the threshold control? The threshold is going to control what the compressor is going to detect. Normally in a vocal, the compressor does not need to detect the entire dynamic range of the vocal. So for example, we want to keep the body. There's no reason to compress more of the body, the sustain. If you blow up this, We don't need the compressor to compress this. But these peaks over here, we need the compressor to compress anything that's sticking out.
Clearly see the new world you will bring.
The best thing to do is play this and you turn the threshold up until it stops compressing and see if it catches a transient.
Tell me everything you see and love, so I can clearly see the new world you will bring. Tell me everything you see and love, so I can clearly see the new world you will bring. And gaze upon the light in your eyes.
Now, when it gets to parts like this, the average level of this part is bigger than the one before it, then you know you need more compression.
The new world you will bring. And gaze upon the light in your eyes as you speak life into me.
So around that -20, hear the difference at a -10.
The new world you will bring. And gaze upon the light in your eyes as you.
It sounds louder at the your eyes part.
The new world you will bring. And gaze upon the light in your eyes as you speak life into.
That seemed to bring that your eyes part in level. And this is without going through the vocal and adjusting it at the clip level basis. So at this point, we got the attack release ratio threshold. We have set this compressor and it sounds good. We have not over compressed. We're only getting as much as 3 dB of gain reduction, but we have even out the vocal. The better you get the settings, the less damage you have to make with the compressor. So now we get something like this.
Baby, I long to know your secret thoughts and visions you hold dear. Tell me all the things you dream of. Tell me everything you see and love, so I can clearly see the new world you will bring. And gaze upon the light in your eyes as you speak life into me. A new song, man. Baby, I long to know your secret thoughts and visions you hold dear. Tell me all the things you dream of. Tell me everything you see and love, so I can clearly see the new world.
Okay, so like I said, this is only the first level of compression, but nothing sounds distorted. Everything still sounds natural. It still sounds like she had dynamics. It still sounds good. So ladies and gentlemen, this is your video on compression, and we're using the Presonus VT1. No, you don't have to have the VT1, but if you use Studio One, I will highly recommend this channel strip. There will be more on this plugin in the future. If you like this channel, please like and subscribe this channel. If you like me, my name is Hibru, please like and subscribe this channel. And as always, I will be giving more as promised. Stay tuned and thank you for watching.